Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Magicians Only. Are you a magician? Doesn't matter if you're not, but it's really good if you are or if you want to be, because this is the place for you. This is where we discuss everything pertaining to magic except the secrets. The secrets you can find at Magic on the Go, at magiconthego.com, which is my online magic school. It's for everyone who wants to learn magic. There's stuff for beginners, advanced, almost 1,000 tricks. And now with, you know what? Now it's got a monthly subscription, so you can get on for less. And you have access to everything. There is no throttling, you have access to everything. One of the things I mentioned recently was this idea of doing a Q&A episode, and I got some lovely questions from people, and so I'm gonna start peppering them into the episodes. I'm gonna start with this one here. This is an email I got from someone by the name of Sarah. Hello, Sarah. Spinning dog, you know who you are, if you know what I'm saying. So Sarah isn't a magician, she's a muggle, but she stumbled across the podcast, as one does when one's walking. And this is why I love doing what I do, because what I'm trying to do is to make this podcast appeal not just to magicians, but to anyone who loves magic. And she said in her email, the advice that you and other magicians, comedians, producers, etc. dish out don't just apply to the world of magic, but to life. The timing of when to be quiet and still on stage and when to become larger than life, I find also applies to horse training. There are times when you need to be loud to get the animal's attention, and once you have their attention, see how quiet you can be. Also figuring out what works and what doesn't. While riding, the timing, the aids of your legs, the seat and the hand can make the horse's movement look effortless, like a brilliant magic trick, or mess it up. And magicians may end up with egg on their face, but in the horse world, you end up in the dirt. And if you're really unlucky, in a pile of horse poop. Keep up the intriguing podcast episodes. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you're getting something out of it. That means the world to me, because we can learn so much from everything that we do. It doesn't necessarily have to be the business that we're in, right? We can be inspired by the works of so many other people. So today's episode, it's a bit of a time capsule, this one. I recently came across this on Magic on the Go. I'd published it in 2020 while we were in lockdown. And you can tell because I've got my COVID beard and hair, and we weren't allowed to leave and all that. Remember that? Do you remember that? Yeah, right. We didn't know if theatre, live entertainment was going to come back. Well, during that time, I had just finished a tour with the Illusionists. It was my first ever tour. We were going across North America, and it was quite an experience. And so I decided to record my thoughts, the stuff that I'd learned, and also a little bit of video here and there, my experience of working with the Illusionists. One of the things I don't mention in this two-part episode, one of the things that I don't mention is the fact that while we were touring across the States, I remember that two of the guys kept getting sick, right? And these were the youngest, fittest guys, and they just kept going to the gym, and they would get so sick, and we just thought there was this crazy flu. Turns out it was probably COVID. But this was in November and December of 2019. I recorded this in 2020. If you're a magician, you're going to get a lot out of this, because I'm going to share with you everything that I learned about the tour, and you'd be amazed how much there is. If you're not a magician, you're going to learn a lot. Well, apart from just like the fun stories, you're going to learn what it takes if you're a speaker, how to handle an audience, how to be on stage, what to do with a crew, how to travel with efficiency. There's a lot in this episode. So I really hope you enjoy it. Let's travel back to 2020 and my first ever Illusionists tour. Oh, hello. Didn't see you come in. Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Armchair Stories, a very special Armchair Stories. For historical reference, I do want to say that this is being recorded during the quarantine of 2020, although I think the information that's going to be kind of imparted in this Armchair Story will be useful forevermore. It's ironic because I'm going to talk to you about the tour that I did with the Illusionists, what I experienced, what I learned, the pros and cons, and a lot of the other stuff that you don't think about before you embark on such an adventure. And I know that the idea of doing a show in front of, say, in a theater for 3,000 and 5,000 people seems really weird right now, because we're in this 6 feet away social isolation period. But I know it's going to come back. But more than that, I feel that what I learned from the other magicians that I toured with, from the production team, from the crew, from the audiences, is applicable to everything that we do as magicians and performers, and maybe even as human beings. So, welcome to Armchair Stories, the Illusionists Tour. You made it when you're investing.
Confetti in my hair.
And that's the real magic. So I was very excited to be asked to perform in the Illusionists Tour for a number of reasons. As you know, I've spent my entire life building my own personal brand as an actor, as a magician, as whatever, and we do. It's very important that we focus on who we are, our personality to the public, how we're represented, and getting our name out there in any way possible. But the Illusionists is a different beast. And it took me a while to kind of get used to that concept. It's a different beast because it's not about the individual. The show is about the whole. So, and this is a lesson that we can apply to everything that we do, even when we're doing solo shows. I'll explain what I mean. The Illusionists is a very clever device. It takes 6 to 8 performers of different genres and cuts them together in a fast-moving live show that really has nothing to do with the individual persona of the magician. It does as a performer, but each magician is given his own character name. This enables the producers to have a format for an illusion show that they can then slot performers into. Very clever, because it allows for scalability. You can have 13 or 14 illusionist shows touring around the world, all working on the same basic structure, music, vibe, light, and sound. Everything is kind of similar. Yet the performers bring their own props, their own material to the piece. The other thing that's very important to understand with the Illusionists is that, and I should say that was a very difficult thing for me to get my head around at the beginning, because, as I said, we're all about promoting ourselves. Now, our names are in the program and we're introduced as our names, but also as the character name, which is, the mentalist or the showman or whatever it may be. It took a while for me to grasp the idea. And once I did, the idea of being part of this group, of this team, was very exciting. Ironically enough, I should tell you that back in 2009, I created a reality magic show that I sold to Fox. Unfortunately, it didn't get made, but the result was supposed to be a team of magicians touring around America. I'm not going to tell you how we get there, because we're now out pitching it again. But that was the idea. The idea was to have a team of magicians interacting. This is pre-Illusionists. So it's kind of ironic all these years later that I get invited to be part of a tour about a group of magicians performing together. So once I got that particular ego out of the way of, hey, it's not just about me, I looked at the tour as a whole. I was excited about a number of things. I was excited to perform with this incredible team of magicians. Florian Sanvey, Stuart McLeod, Jonathan Goodwin, so many great, Sauce and Victoria, amazing performers that the whole bunch of them that I thought I could learn a lot from in a good way, but also get to know on the tour. I was excited to see how a show like this comes together. I was excited to see how the crew and the sound and the lights and the tour manager and all of those aspects merge and have to become a well-oiled machine. A lot of this has to do with not just the performance. There are so many other people involved, which we're going to get into in this endeavor, that I was excited to see how everything was going to mesh together. And I was also excited, really excited, to travel around North America. We were going to be performing in some incredible places, to work in these theaters, these 3,000 to 5,000 seat theaters, to visit these towns that I'd never been to before in my entire life, and to meet people, right?
The end of another great evening. Hey boys, say hello, hello. Everyone say hi. Here we go. Another fabulous night in Wilmington. And now, this stuff.
To experience what it is to tour around on a tour bus, what it is to tour with a group of magicians together, the personalities. Is that going to work? There are people in the crew and in the magical team who have toured for many years and kind of have it down pat. I haven't toured. I toured a little bit of theatre in the past, way back in the past, but not as a magician. I was excited about the idea of working with cameras on stage, that you can do nowadays. I mean, the technology is so amazing. You could do a trick with a match in front of 5,000 people and it will play. People are used to it now. I think a number of years back, if people came to see an illusion show and you pulled out a coin trick, they might feel cheated if they had to watch the entire thing on screen. Nowadays, people almost feel more comfortable watching it on the screen. So that was something that I was interested in playing with and getting to kind of learn the choreography of that. I was excited not to have to do my own lighting and sound. Having been so used to operating it all from my pocket on a little remote, the idea of actually having it set professionally, having an incredible lighting rig, incredible sound designer, people being able to come in and out exactly when I wanted to, having a live sound person who could work with me as I'm working off of the audience members that was exciting. And I was excited to see what material I was going to bring to the stage and how it would fit into the show. Because the secret of the Illusionists, and it's really the secret of any Broadway show, is that it is the sum of its parts. And the positioning is not just about the magic and the performance, it's about where that person is in the show. And I'm not talking from an egotistical point of view. In the old days they used to talk about, if you close the first half or if you're the final performer, you're the star of the show. That's not what this is about. Everyone is introduced as the star of the show. We are the Illusionists. At the beginning of the show, everyone appears on stage together. And at the end of the show, everybody takes a bow together. The point, what I'm trying to say is it's a roller coaster. The show is a roller coaster. And what's really important is the positioning of the performer. Who comes before you, the energy or the scale of that piece, who comes after you. It moves, it has to move, which is why most of the performances range between 5 and 8 minutes. Each performance piece. You may, as a performer within this kind of variety concept, you may end up doing 2 or 3 spots throughout the show, maybe more, maybe less. That's entirely up to the producers. So one of the things that I had to think about first of all was what material was going to work within this format. And so I put together a ton of ideas. I mean, I just started everywhere I was. I got out my notebook on my phone and I started writing ideas down, how I was going to adapt my show and material from my show into this format. There were certain things that I didn't have time to set up. There were certain things that were too long, certain bits that were too long, and certain things that if I did them too early, they wouldn't have the same impact because the audience hadn't got to know me. Now, one of the things that we ended up doing was, because I was essentially the host of the show, was right after we all appeared on stage, I would welcome the audience and then go right into my first routine. Now, I wanted to do my opening sequence from my act where I talk about all the different ways that magicians can say hello. And to me, it seemed to fit into the idea of the Illusionists. You're going to see all these Illusionists and they all have their own styles and they all have a certain way of opening a show. But in the end, what we ended up was my chocolate box routine. Now, the chocolate box routine is in normality, in my normal show, the chocolate box is 12 to 15 minutes. Why? Because there's all these other little bits of magic that are cut in between. It's a tight routine. It's a personality piece, and it's also a piece that I do once the audience gets to know me. So I was resistant. To the idea of opening with chocolate box because the audience essentially would now be getting to know me through the chocolate box as opposed to they know me from the earlier material. So now I can kind of relax and play with them with the chocolate box routine. And also one of the other things that I needed to do was to frame everything in a holiday way. It's a holiday tour. It was the magic of the holidays. So how do you do that without hitting it over the head? You know, not like going, here's a trick I did for Santa. Oh, by the way, and that was the other thing. You really wanted to call it the holiday tour, not the Christmas tour, because you want to incorporate everybody's holiday. It's very important to make everybody feel welcome. In the end, as much as I resisted the idea of opening with the chocolate box, it really worked. And the reason it worked is, one of the reasons is that when I throw out chocolate at the beginning of the show, so you can imagine with a family audience, the kids and everybody just loving this chocolate flying everywhere. And of course, we had a budget, so I could afford a big giant box of chocolates to throw out to the audience. So that was a lovely way of opening the show. Would I open my own personal show with a chocolate box? Never. No, absolutely not. I want it later on in the show. And also, I had to tighten up the routine to between 8 and 10 minutes. And actually, when you work in a format like this, the timing of your routines is of paramount importance. You have a show that has 2 acts that has to run a certain amount of time. And it's not just about, yes, it is about the idea of one show and the next act and the next act and the next act and the build with the audience and the vibe and the feel of the show. But there's also practical measures here. There's, the crew, especially if you're working in a union house, and we worked in union and non-union houses, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But the crew is paid by the hour, by the show sometimes, and if you go overtime, it's very expensive for the production. So you don't want to be that guy who ends up going too long and then causes the production to lose money and costs them. There are fines. There are all kinds of things that come from the theatre. So you want to be within a certain period of time. Very, very important. So I was asked to do the chocolate box routine, a 12 to 15 minute routine, and get it into 6 to 8 minutes. Next to impossible. I managed to get it down between 8 and 9 minutes. But that all depends, because I love working with audience members. And if you get someone up, if you're lucky enough to get someone up who's got some personality and you want to play with that. I mean, one night we had this lady, she must have been in her 80s. I said, I need a lady to come up on stage. And this lady, she was in her 80s, she stood up and she said, I'm a lady, use me. So what do you say to that, So I brought her on stage, took a bit of time, she was a bit older, and she was hilarious. She would not stay in the same position. She kept wandering over, watching things over my shoulder. And I kept ordering her like a little child to get back to her side of the stage and hold the prop like I gave it to her. Anyway, she stole the show and it was wonderful. And I love it when assistants steal the show in a good way. I think anyone who brings life and humor to your show and gives you a chance also to show your human side. But in your show, in the idea of having this, you don't know what's going to happen, having someone play with you and you play back lifts you out of your script. Now, you should always be kind of just loosely basing your show on your script anyway. But this really brings you out of your script and you're alive. And when you're alive and in the moment, the audience is alive and in the moment with you. So this lady was incredible. Now, there are other things I'll talk about a little bit later on when it comes to assistants and pros and cons. But anyway, so I was excited to work in the chocolate box and to make that fit. And I put together so many ideas for routines. In the end, where we ended up was I was going to open with the chocolate box, then introduce the next show. The next time the audience would see me would be a very intimate piece, because I felt chocolate box also is a very cheeky piece, right? And you want to look at this when you look at the material in your show. Like, what does this say about your personality? Well, chocolate box is I'm cheeky, I'm funny. There's not necessarily an incredibly warm side to the chocolate box. So the next piece, which was important, had to be an intimate piece, because later in the show, I was going to close the show with the snow routine. So we needed the audience to like me. I mean, they might like me in the chocolate box, but they might like me as a funny comedic magician. I need them to like me as a human being. So I came up with the idea of doing the angel card trick, Twilight Angels, Paul Harris's amazing effect to camera. I've done it before to camera in front of a lot of people, and it always works very well. And to do it with a kid from the audience. So I just want to stop here at this point and just say, I'm talking about the sequence of my routines. I'm not going to talk about what other people did in the show, but I do want to say how this came about. We all presented to the team, a number of ideas for routines that we could do in the show, and we brought them with us. And then for 1 week in Ohio at this wonderful theater, we worked, finessed, learned, tried different running orders. We learned the opening sequence, the closing sequence with everybody. The director came in, the producers, they all came in, they looked at the running order, they shifted things around. And that happened, that shifting of things around happened throughout the entire tour. It happened for a number of reasons. One, maybe they felt that the show was stronger. Okay, now we're going to move this here, we're going to move this here. And this works in your show, right? When you're doing a personal show, you do it one way. Try moving a trick here and another trick here and seeing how that works out. Because really, the sum of the whole is the most important thing. So during the course of that week, we got to know the crew, and the crew got to know us. We got to try out different routines. I had to learn Kevin James's snow trick for the finale, because this is a signature piece for the Illusionists. But I didn't want to do Kevin's presentation, so I had to come up with my own presentation. I had to workshop it with the director and the producer. So I wrote down some ideas, and in the end came up with this very kind of personal rendition, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. So by the end of the week, we had our first performance, and the running order was posted about 30 minutes before showtime, and we all went out and we did it. Now, with this Twilight Angel trick, I should tell you, I'm not a kids performer. I don't do kids parties. I don't have an interest in doing kids parties. Love kids, don't really want to do kids parties for many reasons that most of you probably already know. And I have such respect for kids performers because it takes a certain personality that I don't have. But this is a family audience. And as a family audience, you're going to have a lot of children, and they're all going to want to be part of the show at some point. So this angel card trick piece was very important to connect with the kids and create a slightly sweeter side. And also, after the chocolate box, which is very cheeky, what I didn't want was for people to be afraid of me, so I couldn't get anybody else up on stage, right? So, Twilight Angels, I go out, I pick a kid, I sit them on the front of the stage, and we do the Twilight Angel trick. In the end, I had this idea of doing the Twilight Angels where the angel moves off the back of the card and having a little smoke at the right point, but it wasn't actually necessary. I cut it out. I thought it was a great idea, but it didn't add necessarily anything to the trick. But the interaction with the kid was important. And I wasn't going to do any of the usual kids gags, kids show gags. I just wanted to meet a little kid, sit them on the stage, and have a little moment of wonder with them. Because it was a holiday show, I called the angels on the backs of the cards, I called them little holiday angels. And I wanted to bring them together for the holidays. So the idea worked really well. And I learned probably the most important thing about working with kids. There is a sweet spot. There is a sweet spot of age, okay? And for me, it is between 6 and 10. So from 6 to 9 years old, max. Anything over 9 years old, when you bring that age of a kid on stage, you're playing with fire. I learned this at the Fox Theater in Detroit when we were performing for 5,000 people, and this kid stuck her head in the air. She really wanted to come up for the angel card trick. I sat her on the front of the stage, and as soon as she got on stage, she went, and she gave me attitude throughout the entire piece. Now, it was funny in that I got to work off of her stoicness, shall we say, and every now and again she'd break and then she'd come back and give me this kind of like, I'm not impressed 10-year-old attitude. And at the end of it, when I sent her back to her seat, I said, well, I was impressed. And I looked at the audience and said, so that's 10 years old, is it? That's what I've got to look forward to as a father. And everyone was like, yeah. So we found a way to connect, even though it didn't create the sweetness, the moment that I really wanted. I still was able to make it connect with an audience, right? And that's what you always have to do. Don't ever give up because it doesn't go the way you want it to do. You want it to go. It has to go the way it's going to go. And then you just have to make it work for you. I think in many ways, it's a bit like anyone out there who has kids will know the birth story. Like you kind of put together a birth story that the wife would want a birth story. This is how she wants the perfect pregnancy to go, how she wants her birth to go. But in the end, life takes over and you're going to have the baby in a car on the 405, which almost happened to a friend of mine. At the end of the show, I had to do my own presentation for Kevin James' Snow Trick. What I ended up doing and working out was based on a true story, which was that we just moved to Canada recently, and my daughter, who is a California baby, had never experienced playing in snow. And so this was awesome because instead of saying that there are some kids who have never experienced snow, I could talk about my daughter. I could bring her picture up on stage, which meant so much to me every single night. I'm like, this is my kid, and then her picture it comes up on the board, and it connected me with her. And so that was very important to me. So I would then bring a little child up on stage to play the role of my kid, and I would demonstrate how I prepared my kid to deal with snow. After the first couple of performances where I simply relied on going out into the audience and picking a kid spontaneously on the moment and having I'm not going to say duds because that's not nice to the kid, but having kids who either had some attitude or weren't effusive enough, I decided I really wanted the kid on stage to have some personality and a sweetness to them. And so I went out halftime every show. I decided to do this. I would go out and I would, during the interval, and I would ask a kid, ask the parents, if it was okay, and ask a child if they wanted to come up and help me at the end of the show. This ended up being one of my favorite moments of the whole tour because every time I would go, I get to meet the audience, and the audience wants to meet you. They've just seen you on stage, and now here you are walking around, shaking hands, saying hi to everybody, talking to the kids, and you find the perfect child. And for me, I would get that kid's name. And that kid was so excited and revved up by the end of the show because they knew they were coming up on stage. And I would say 90% of the time, my selections were great. And the kid would come bounding up and we would do the snow trick together. I have to say that in the end, the best crowning achievement, the crowning moment for me was when I was performing in Pittsburgh for Christmas, and my family surprised me and they came to visit, and my daughter was in the audience. And so without any rehearsal, I pulled up my daughter onto the stage and I acted like she was a kid from the crowd, and she went with it. She's 8 years old. She went with it. And then at some point I told the story about my daughter, and I brought up the picture of my daughter. And then I looked at the kid on stage who was my daughter, and I looked at the picture and I looked back at my daughter, and then I was like, who's your mom? Which just to many would be inappropriate. But then immediately I was like, let me explain. My family surprised me. This is my kid, and we're going to do the trick together for the first time. It was the first time she'd ever been on stage with me. I barely kept it together. I was very emotional. And when we did the snow trick, and she was a natural, I was very proud of her. She got up, she played in the snow, and she stayed on stage, and we held hands for the bows. And I think it was a moment that I hope she'll never forget. I certainly won't. So back to kind of figuring out what I was going to do in the show. So what was interesting was I'd brought all these props, but in the end, we started with the chocolate box, the angel card trick, and then I was going to bring some acts on and off. And then in the second half, what the guys wanted was what I call my card shark routine, which is essentially the finale of my close-up magic show. We'll have two people up on stage sitting at a table, and we do it to the camera as if we're performing on television. And my gosh, it's a routine. It's a 10-minute routine. It's a long routine, and we got it as tight as possible. Some early card tricks with a signed card, moving into repeat card to wallet, moving into the card between the metal plates, and ending with a tic-tac box with a bunch of holiday gags. I came up with some elf gags, my hand gag, and just making that play. I wasn't sure how that was going to go, because essentially you've got this guy standing in front with the camera and he's getting everyone's reactions. And so I had to learn how to work with the guy with the camera. We had this guy, Leo, who was amazing. I had to work with Leo on getting the close-ups, on getting the dramatic moments within this card shark routine. And it was the favorite thing that I did. One of the favorite, well, I loved every part of the show, to be honest with you. But this was a real thing where I didn't meet the people before they came up on stage. I would have the dancers go out and choose, which was risky. But I wanted to emphasize to the audience that I hadn't met these people before. And we had this like 10 minutes together of nonstop magic. And it was so much fun. You guys, I cannot tell you, when I did this at the Fox Theatre in front of 5,000 people, it went gangbusters. And no one was more surprised than me that the audience was willing to accept. They'd come to a live theater show and they were willing to accept watching a close-up routine on a giant screen. But my gosh, that was liberating. So that was one of my favorite pieces. A little bit later on, I would then do the vanishing cage in the audience. I loved Vanishing Cage, and I put an elf in the cage to make it a holiday piece, and it was very funny. I had some funny lines with that. One of the things that I discovered was being in an audience in the aisle and having the audience all around you as I was presenting the Vanishing Cage was really fun. You've got the reactions, because I can see, I'm facing the stage, and I can see on the screen everybody around me. So to do the Vanishing Cage like that, surrounded, was very powerful. But also, sometimes the reactions of the people around me got laughs too. There was a woman one night who was to my left. She looked a bit like Dame Edna. If you don't Dame Edna, you know, just this kind of older woman with her hair perfect and the glasses down on her nose with her arms crossed like this. The whole time, just like this. Nothing, not a thing moved. She's there like this. I can see her in the camera. I keep looking back at her and like smiling at the camera, and there's nothing from her. But the audience is starting to cotton on that I'm a little bit disturbed by this woman who doesn't seem to be enjoying herself. I make the cage vanish, which, by the way, a vanishing cage on camera, there's a certain retention of vision, and it looks so magical. I mean, it looks like a camera trick. So I'm there, cage vanishes. I open my jacket, I bang my sleeves, I spin around, no cage. And as I'm spinning around, I see her and she's like this. And so I start to, I'm like, well, I thought it was great, you know, and I'm doing this. She's not cottoning on at all. I don't know where she is. The rest of the audience starts laughing with me. And now I'm trying to introduce the next show, the next act, and I am crying. Now, as a performer, you want everyone to love what you do. And so there's two ways. You can be like really upset, you know, that this person is like not having a good time. Or you can just find it funny. And if the audience is with you, oh my God, it took 2 minutes to introduce the next act because I couldn't stop laughing. And the audience was laughing with me. And it was a beautiful moment. Then we moved, I introduced the following show. And then at the end of it, I came out and I did Snow Trick, which led into the finale. So the length of time for your pieces is very important when it comes to doing a show like this. And in fact, if you're working on television or working for anyone, you should know the length of every routine, give or take a little bit. And I say give or take because you're going to be working with real people on stage for your audience participation. And almost everything I did had a piece of audience participation. The first night I went on, the crew, and these are the people that the most important people to you, because you're going to be traveling with these guys. You got to get to know them, and they all have a very specific job to do. And they're not just dealing with you; they're also dealing with stage management, the theater owners, the unions crew. If there's a union crew, there's a lot of things that they have to deal with. So they expect your show to kind of go the same way every night. If you were performing on Broadway and you were going out and you were doing a song or a dance routine, it would be the same every night. You wouldn't be improvising different things. So the first couple of nights, the management spoke to me and said, hey, you know, that was really different to last night. And it's important, and I get where they're coming from, because the timing was different. The lighting would have to be a little bit different. The switcher, so when you're working with cameras on a big theater like this, the person who's switching to the various frames on camera is trying to follow you as well. Like, you know, that was different to what we rehearsed. And so we had to have these conversations where I'm like, it's going to be different every night. And I'm going to try and keep it within the same framework. So physically, I tried to keep it in the same choreography, but verbally, you have to go with the flow. So this was a learning lesson between the two of us. So they had to flow with me a little bit. I had to kind of like keep it within a certain framework for them. Teamwork. You want to get them on your side. You don't want to have an audience, your crew against you, which is a beautiful thing because it forces you to super analyze what you're going to do in the show, what each line is. Even though you could veer off of it, you really need to look at what you're doing, how you're going to go from moment to moment. And when you're doing something like a variety show where it's a number of individual pieces versus the arc of, say, a whole act,
Your individual piece, now you refer to it, you look at it like it's a whole act. And so you can get the opening, the middle, and the end, even if it's one trick, the opening and the middle of the end. And so for me, educational, I just learned so much by having to analyze for somebody else, because sometimes I'm lazy and I don't do it for myself, but having to analyze for them exactly what I was going to do. Because if I want to be lit, if I want to be seen, if I want to be heard, if I want the music to come in at the right place, if I want the camera to pick up the right moment, then they need to know what I'm going to do, which means I really need to know what I'm going to do. And this is super important when you're working on your own show. Take each piece and analyze it within an inch of its life. And again, using the Illusionists format of placement, like where in your act each piece goes, is just as important as where in an Illusionist show each act goes. The ups and downs and the build and the music, the audience participation, the visualness, the character, the connection with the crowd, all has to be worked out.
We're going to leave it right there. That's the end of part 1. Be sure to check out next week's episode. It's kind of crazy, right, to look back and see a version of Steve who doesn't know whether live entertainment's going to come back. I was trying to be positive at the time. I wasn't entirely sure. Let's summarize a few things. First of all, ego. One of the biggest things I learned about the tour is you got to put your ego to the side. Still got to have it. You just got to, put it with everybody else's ego and learn to work together. It's all about the teamwork. Doesn't matter whether you're doing a magic show or whether you're working together with a corporate team on some really important project for the company. Ego has to have its right place. Too many times I have seen ego destroy a project. Obviously, a tour like the Illusionists is all about the teamwork. But think about the teamwork when it comes to your solo show. When you arrive at a venue, you still got to have a client, you still got to set up, you still got to work with the people in a hotel maybe in order to set up the stage. It's all teamwork. They're members of your team, even if they don't know it. Right? It's like when you get an assistant on stage. You're doing a scene with that person. They just don't know it. They just don't know their lines. So it's the same when you're doing a magic show, when you're walking around. Other people at the venue or at the gig or at the speaking engagement or at the presentation at a conference, they're also part of your team. They just don't know it. It was also good for me to watch this and to remind myself that an entire performance is the sum of its parts. And this, by the way, doesn't just refer to you being on stage. Your entire performance starts the second that you get out of your car and you arrive. Doesn't matter whether it's a magic show, whether it's a conference, whether it's an interview. When you get out of the car, you are your performer. You are starting the show right then. It is the sum of the parts. Somebody sees you walk into the building and you're cranky, they're going to talk about that, and that's going to be part of your reputation. There was a magician called Alexander Herman who was one of the greatest of all times, and the stories of what would happen when he would arrive in town to promote his magic show that was going to be on in a theater. This was way before social media. He literally was physical social media himself. He would walk into restaurants and bars. He would walk up to someone, pull a rabbit out of their jacket and walk out again. I mean, he created moments. He knew the second that he arrived in town that his show had begun. The reputation had begun. And so I think that's really important to remember. Everything you do, your performance, your persona, your presentation, it is a sum of the parts. And by the way, this goes to after you do your show, when you're packing up, when people want to speak to you, how you handle that is also part of the show. One of the most embarrassing things that ever happened to me was I'd finished a show, this was years and years ago, and the client asked me to stay and have dinner with them, with everybody else in the room, and I really wanted to go. Of course, I'm a starving artist. I'm not going to turn down a steak dinner. So I'm rushing the food, and a piece of meat gets stuck in my throat, and I start to choke. Now, I turn to the person next to me, and I'm pointing at my stomach, my throat, and my stomach, and I'm doing this as if to say, give me the Heimlich. They're not understanding. Some guy from another table looks over, sees that I'm turning blue, runs over, picks me up, gives me the Heimlich maneuver. Piece of meat goes shooting out of my mouth across the room, and he saves my life. Now, that audience saw me do a magic show, but they're going to remember that the stupid ass magician almost died at our event. That was part of my experience for that night, and unfortunately part of the experience for everyone at that event, the sum of the parts. The good news is they get to tell everybody that the magician didn't die. Well, I guess that's good news for people who like magic. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Don't forget, Magic on the Go, magiconthego.com. If you enjoyed it, hey, hit that QR code and drop the team a tip, maybe. It's entirely up to you. You don't have to. I'm going to do this anyway, but if you'd like to show your appreciation, we all appreciate it here. So tune in next week for part 2 of the tour. I guarantee it's going to be a lot of fun and some stories that you're not going to believe. So I'll see you next week. Much love. Bye.